Hi everyone, my name's Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and today I'm going to chat about my favorite reads from the adult science fiction fantasy category. Of the 81 adult speculative fiction sci-fi fantasy books I read in 2023, I picked 12 that I want to talk about today. To be fair, it's because I've put science fiction and fantasy together, so in this kind of speculative fiction umbrella, and I feel like that should be allowed. Personally, that's just how I feel. And I kind of am making the rules on the channel, so that's what we're going to see. The first one that I want to chat about is Babel. If you've been following me for a while, you know that Babel owns my heart. I love Babel. I'm not going to talk about it a lot because A, I have a full review, and also B, I included Babel and actually The First Bright Thing, and actually a couple more in this section in my top 10 reads of 2023. So definitely go back and watch that video if you want to see me kind of flail a little bit more about Babel. The next one is Bitter Medicine, which I definitely have a copy of. I got it signed at the Columbus Book Festival Book Fair event. So I definitely have a copy of 4, but I cannot find it honestly at this moment. But Bitter Medicine is such a perfect blend between romance and fantasy. It's an urban fantasy, so it feels very much, there's portals, there's magical bureaucracy, like it feels fantastic in the world building sense. It feels very much like our world but with magic, which I absolutely love. The romance elements and the character dynamic, the character tension, the romantic angst is just like chef's kiss, honestly, in Bitter Medicine. So that's definitely my favorite. Also, people have been asking me now for romantasy or romantic fantasy recommendations, and Bitter Medicine, top of the list. The next one is The Lies of the Ajunga, which also made it into my top 10 of 2023. Go back and check out that video. This novella was fabulous. I cannot wait for the next one. And speaking of novellas, I also have Mislaid in Parts Half Known, which is the most recent Wayward Children novella. It came out in January 2024, so actually I read it in 2023. This is one of my favorite novella series, and this is one of my favorite recent releases in the Wayward Children novella series. I know that I said that about the last one before this one, but this one feels very much like the part 2. So basically, I don't remember anyone's names. It just is what it is. The main character of the one before this, the one where there are all those magical doors, I loved that one so much. It talks about informed choice and the knowledge and the weight of these choices that we're making, sometimes without knowing the consequences. But basically, Mislaid in Parts Half Known is about that character again. So it feels very much like these two are kind of a separate mini-series. They're not really, but that's kind of how it feels. And I think that's why I really loved Mislaid in Parts Half Known. Also, it really picks up some of the characters we've seen in various other novellas within the series. It just kind of felt like a great end cap to the series. I don't think it's the end, but it just felt like a really great kind of recap of all of our favorites again. The next one is Jackal. Jackal was this speculative fiction mystery thriller. It has the monster is racism, right? So I mean, that's not real in the sense that there is an actual monster who is terrifying a community, we think. So there very much is kind of a monster, but I think what I love about Jackal is it also talks about the monstrosity of racism within a community, which is still very much present today. It's a contemporary urban fantasy, I guess, in the way that it talks a little bit about monsters. I did some panels with the author of Jackal, so I will definitely link that below because it was really fabulous to talk about the monsters, our fears, what the monsters represent, and I was kind of just like, like racism is also the monster. So I loved Jackal. The next one is Thief, Liar, Lady, which I've read a ton of fantasy retellings, okay? It's just the thing. I know that, we've had this trend for Greek mythology retellings. Fantasy retellings have kind of been a thing ever since they've come back, or fantasy retellings are going strong. I read a lot of them. Thief, Liar, Lady is one of my favorites that I read in 2023, I think, because it talks about not only what happened in their version of the Cinderella story that we're seeing, so that's the past for them. This is kind of like a part 2 to the Cinderella story, but it talks about the ways in which it has already subverted the Cinderella story that we know. So in this way, it kind of felt like a double feature. It felt like a retelling, but also a informed explanation and exploration of the ramifications of that retelling, if that makes any sense. The next one is The First Bright Thing, which I mentioned as well in my top 10 of 2023. Love this one. Definitely watch it if you want to hear an interesting story about last year. The next one is The Serpent and Wings of Night, which I think is the title. There might be an extra "the" in it. This one to me was just like Underworld personified. I grew up watching Underworld films. Like, it just was part of my teenage life, I guess. And The Serpent and the Wings of Night felt like that. It felt like this vampire-human relationship. That was the key part. It was kind of gender bent in that perspective, but there are also similar to Underworld, there's also like secrets about this vampire lore, vampire culture, vampire history that our main character, or one of the characters, doesn't really know about, I think, which also made me love Underworld a lot. And as well, in addition, there are magical battle scenes. There's a kind of deadly competition and sort of Hunger Games style battle, I guess. So for me, it was just kind of like the perfect melding of a bunch of different things I really, really love. And that's why it made it onto my top reads, because it was just so fun and nostalgic while also being very new. The next one is To Cage a God, which also comes out in 2024, but I read in 2023. This one was a fantastic story about rebellion, but also sisterhood. It also felt like I love a good theme about a character who has to learn to embrace their powers and learn about their powers and have that tie into their own journey of selfhood and self-value and kind of self-identity. And To Cage a God, that plus the romantic subplots were really just beautiful. Also, the rebellion aspect was really fantastic. I enjoyed seeing that kind of play out on the streets. The next one is The Day Death Stopped, which feels to me like Good Omens. Okay, I've mentioned that, I think in the November wrap-up is when I mentioned The Day That Death Stopped, and it to me feels like Good Omens in book form. It has that kind of wry, dry, sarcastic humor. It has a bunch of footnotes. It has those interactions between two main characters, or two characters, where you're kind of just like, just really shocked and pleased and delighted by their interchanges in the way that they get to know each other. Like, the main character, in my opinion, of The Day Death Stopped was fantastic. It also talks about heroes and anti-heroes. I will link that panel that we did about The Day Death Stopped, because that has a lot to do with who is the hero of your own story, of everyone else's story, what makes an anti-hero, what makes a villain, like all of those themes, if you love them, The Day That Death Stopped. The next one is Ebony Gate, which is a start of an urban fantasy series, which is so fun. I listened to the audiobook because I love Natalie Naudus as an audiobook narrator. And I listened to Ebony Gate, and it was amazing. It has some really, really fun urban fantasy fight scenes, which hit different, obviously, because they're, set in our world and not like, in a fantastical world. But I think what I really loved about Ebony Gate is that it talks about having power. It talks about walking away from that power. I made the conscious choice to walk away from the power because of what it made me, but I still have that power, and what is now my responsibility to do with that power? Like, that theme, that kind of question as a whole, made the reading of Ebony Gate just so much more satisfying to me. I loved it. I cannot wait for the next one. And finally, the 12th one, I guess, is that I read last year, Feybound. If you've been following me for a while, you will know that I love Sarah El Arifi. I love the Battle Drum. I love the Final Strife. I cannot wait for the next one, which is the ending. I get the third book and the actual name of the series confused. But anyway, I cannot wait for the end of that trilogy. But I loved Feybound. It was like atmospheric. It talked a lot about what we will do for the people we love, but also what happens when the people we love have different sides to them that make us question if we love them. Like, I guess to me, that kind of goes to the core of what love is, right? Is love loving someone for their best qualities, or is love loving someone for their worst qualities, or somewhere in between? I think Feybound talks about that. It talks about sacrifice. It has like some very fun romantic subplots. It also features sisters. I love sisters. I love relationships like that so much. It talks about that complex nature. It also brings to a head their feelings about the past, their feelings about each other as sisters, which they haven't really had time to confront, but they will in Feybound. And I cannot wait for the second already. I read it before it came out. I can't wait for the sequel, obviously, which is not out too. So like, I'm just here in perpetual wait for the book, for the next one. That's kind of just my lot in life. So those were my top picks for the adult speculative fiction sci-fi fantasy category. I hope that you enjoyed. Please let me know down below if you read any of these, but also if you read a book that you think I should read for 2024. I have really already in 2024 delved so hard into adult sci-fi fantasy. Like, I think that so far in the month, I can think of 4 or 5 that I already read and loved and probably are going to feature again in my 2024 tops. So I'm thriving for this genre. I'm saying it now. 2024 is going to be the year that I just like headfirst fall into adult science fiction fantasy. I know that in the last couple of years, I kind of veered a little bit away from it. I went a lot to the YA sphere, the YA sci-fi fantasy, but I'm coming back, baby, and I will see how 2024 fares.